What if the wife you buried in your heart 20 years ago suddenly appeared alive, standing just a few feet away? And what if the young woman beside her had your exact eyes? Today's emotional story is filled with mystery, heartbreaking twists, shocking secrets, and a family reunion that will leave you in tears. If you enjoy powerful, emotional stories with unforgettable endings, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring story. Now, without wasting any more time, let's get started. 20 years had passed since the day Ethan Brooks watched the rescue boats disappear into the stormy waters off the Oregon coast. That morning had begun with laughter, sunshine, and plans for a quiet weekend away with his wife, Sarah. By sunset, the Coast Guard had declared her missing after their small boat capsized in a violent storm. Despite weeks of searching, no body was ever found. The authorities eventually declared Sarah legally dead. But Ethan never stopped wondering if there had been something he could have done differently. Every anniversary of that terrible day brought back the same questions, the same guilt, and the same empty feeling that settled deep inside his heart. Yet life refused to stand still, forcing him to keep moving forward for the sake of the little boy waiting at home. Raising Noah alone became Ethan's greatest purpose. His son had only been 4 years old when Sarah disappeared, too young to fully understand why his mother never returned. Ethan worked long hours as an architect in Seattle, designing skyscrapers and community buildings while trying to be both father and mother at home. Every morning began before sunrise with breakfast, school lunches, and encouraging smiles, even on the days when his own heart felt completely exhausted. Friends often praised Ethan for staying strong, but they never saw the lonely nights when he sat quietly in the living room, holding Sarah's old wedding photograph. He promised himself that Noah would never feel abandoned, even if it meant sacrificing every dream he once had for himself. Over the years, Ethan built a respected architectural firm, known for restoring historic buildings across Washington state. His reputation grew because he believed every damaged structure deserved another chance instead of being demolished. Secretly, he wondered if that philosophy came from his own broken heart. While clients admired his creativity, his employees admired his kindness. Ethan treated everyone with patience and respect because he understood that every person carried invisible pain. Noah, now 24, had recently graduated from university and joined the company as a junior project manager. Watching his son become an honest, hard-working young man filled Ethan with quiet pride. Sarah would have celebrated every achievement with joyful tears, and Ethan often imagined what she would say if she could see the man Noah had become. One autumn morning, Ethan received an invitation to speak at a charity fundraising event in Portland, Oregon. The organization planned to raise money for families affected by natural disasters, a cause close to Ethan's heart. At first, he considered declining because Portland reminded him too much of the coast where Sarah vanished. Noah, however, encouraged him to accept. He believed his father had spent enough years avoiding painful memories. "Maybe facing the past is the only way to stop running from it," Noah gently said before handing Ethan the invitation again. After a long silence, Ethan nodded. He packed a single suitcase, locked the office behind him, and drove south through the rain-soaked highways, unaware that the journey would rewrite everything he believed about his past. The charity gala was held inside one of Portland's most elegant waterfront hotels. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm, golden light across polished marble floors, while soft piano music floated through the grand lobby. Business leaders, local politicians, and generous donors gathered for the evening, exchanging smiles and handshakes before the event began. Ethan arrived early, hoping to review his speech in peace. He thanked the receptionist, adjusted his tie, and slowly walked toward the conference hall, As he passed a quiet seating area near the large glass windows, something caught his attention. A familiar laugh echoed through the lobby. It was soft, gentle, and unmistakably familiar. Ethan froze mid-step, convinced his exhausted mind had begun playing cruel tricks on him after all these years. His eyes slowly turned toward the source of the sound. Sitting beside a window overlooking the river was a woman with chestnut hair tied neatly behind her shoulders. She wore a simple navy blue dress and held a cup of coffee with both hands. Her profile looked hauntingly familiar. Ethan's heartbeat became painfully loud inside his chest. Every logical part of his mind insisted it was impossible, yet his heart recognized her before his eyes fully accepted the truth. The woman turned slightly as someone beside her spoke. Ethan's breath disappeared completely. It was Sarah, older, certainly, with faint lines around her eyes, but unquestionably the woman he had loved for nearly half his life. For one endless moment, the noisy hotel lobby faded away until only her face remained. Before Ethan could take another step, a young woman approached Sarah, carrying 2 folders and a handbag. She looked around, 20 years old, confident and graceful, with dark brown hair flowing over her shoulders. As she smiled at Sarah, Ethan noticed something that made his knees weaken. Her eyes were identical to his own, bright blue, framed by the same eyebrows, carrying the same thoughtful expression he saw every morning in the bathroom mirror. Even the way she tilted her head while listening reminded him of childhood. Photographs of himself. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Countless strangers had shared similar features throughout the world, but this felt different. Something deep inside Ethan whispered a terrifying possibility he could barely allow himself to imagine. Unable to control himself any longer, Ethan slowly walked toward them. Every step felt heavier than the last. 20 years of grief, unanswered questions, and impossible hope crashed together inside him. When he stood only a few feet away, Sarah looked up. The coffee cup slipped slightly from her trembling hands. Color drained from her face, as though she had seen a ghost standing before her. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them held 20 years of love, heartbreak, confusion, and disbelief. Finally, Ethan managed to whisper a single word. "Sarah." His voice cracked with emotion. Tears immediately filled his eyes. The young woman looked back and forth between them, completely confused by the overwhelming tension that had suddenly filled the quiet corner of the hotel lobby. Sarah stood abruptly, her breathing becoming uneven. Instead of running into Ethan's arms, she stepped backwards in visible shock. The young woman reached for her hand, asking if she was all right, but Sarah could not answer. Her eyes never left Ethan's face. They reflected fear, confusion, and something that looked painfully close to recognition. Without warning, Sarah turned away. "We have to leave," she whispered to the young woman. Together they hurried across the lobby toward the hotel exit. Ethan remained frozen for only a second before instinct took over. Ignoring the curious stares of nearby guests, he rushed after them into the cold Portland rain. He had spent 20 years believing his wife was dead. Now she was alive, walking away from him, and beside her stood a young woman with his unmistakable blue eyes. Whatever truth waited ahead, Ethan knew he would follow it until every mystery was finally revealed. The cold Portland rain soaked Ethan's suit as he hurried across the street, never taking his eyes off Sarah and the young woman. They disappeared into a quiet riverside park, sheltered by towering maple trees whose autumn leaves danced in the wind. Ethan finally caught up with them near an empty bench overlooking the Willamette River. His breathing was heavy, not from the run, but from the weight of 20 years crashing onto his shoulders. Sarah slowly turned around. Tears streamed down her cheeks before either of them spoke. The young woman looked between them in complete confusion, sensing that this meeting was far more than an unexpected reunion, between old friends. "Ethan," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling exactly as he remembered. Hearing his name from her lips after 2 decades shattered every wall he had built around his heart. He stepped closer, unable to believe she was real. "How are you alive?" he asked, barely able to form the words. "They searched for weeks. They said you were gone." Sarah lowered her head and covered her face with shaking hands. "I wanted answers too," she replied through tears. "For years, I believed I had lost everything. I never imagined you were still alive." The young woman gently placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, silently encouraging her to explain the impossible story. Sarah slowly gathered her strength before revealing the truth. After the boat overturned during the storm, powerful currents carried her miles away from the accident site. She had suffered severe head injuries and nearly drowned before a commercial fishing vessel spotted her unconscious the following morning. She had no identification because everything had been swept into the ocean. When she woke in a small coastal hospital in Northern California, she remembered nothing, not her name, her family, or even where she came from. Doctors diagnosed her with traumatic amnesia. Weeks became months, and despite nationwide efforts to identify her, no one connected her to the woman declared missing in Oregon. During her recovery, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The doctors explained that the trauma and emergency treatment had hidden the early pregnancy, making it almost impossible to detect immediately after the accident. The news frightened her because she had no memory of the child's father or even her own past. A compassionate retired couple, Robert and Helen Lawson, visited the rehabilitation center regularly as volunteers. They formed a close bond with Sarah and eventually welcomed her into their home while she continued rebuilding her life. They encouraged her to choose a temporary name until her memories returned. She became known as Grace Lawson, carrying only hope that one day the missing pieces of her identity would return. Months later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Holding the infant in her arms became the first moment she truly felt alive again. The little girl's bright blue eyes immediately caught the nurse's attention. Sarah had no explanation for why looking into those eyes filled her with overwhelming emotion. She named the baby Lily because the flower symbolized hope and new beginnings. Robert and Helen helped raise Lily as their granddaughter, surrounding both mother and daughter with love. Although Sarah occasionally dreamed of a smiling man and a little boy running along a beach, every attempt to remember their faces ended in painful headaches. She accepted that some memories might remain lost forever. Years passed peacefully in California. Sarah completed nursing school, determined to dedicate her life to helping others survive the kind of tragedy she barely remembered herself. Lily grew into an intelligent, compassionate young woman with a remarkable talent for photography. She often asked about her father, but Sarah could only admit she honestly did not know who he was. The answer broke her heart every single time. Despite the uncertainty, they built a happy life together. Robert and Helen became the only grandparents Lily had ever known. Sarah treasured every ordinary moment, believing fate had given her a second chance after almost taking everything away. Still, an unexplainable emptiness remained hidden deep within her heart. Everything changed 6 months earlier when Robert passed away peacefully at the age of 86. While organizing his personal belongings, Helen discovered a locked wooden box containing newspaper clippings from 20 years ago. One faded article showed the search for a missing Oregon woman named Sarah Brooks. The photograph looked exactly like the woman they had called Grace for 2 decades. Shocked, Helen showed the articles to Sarah. The moment Sarah saw the picture of herself standing beside Ethan and a small boy, forgotten memories exploded back into her mind like lightning. She collapsed onto the floor, overwhelmed by images of the boat, the storm, Ethan's smile, and little Noah calling her mom. Her entire past returned within minutes. Sarah spent weeks verifying every detail before deciding what to do. She learned that Ethan had never remarried and had devoted his entire life to raising Noah alone. She cried through countless nights after discovering how much pain her disappearance had caused them. Guilt nearly consumed her. She feared Ethan had moved on emotionally and worried Noah might hate the mother who unknowingly abandoned him. Lily insisted they should find the truth together, no matter how painful it might be. After careful planning, they traveled to Portland for a medical charity conference before continuing to Seattle. Sarah wanted time to gather enough courage before unexpectedly walking back into the lives she believed she had destroyed forever. The young woman finally spoke, her own eyes filled with tears. "My name is Lily Lawson," she said softly before looking directly at Ethan. "If everything my mother remembers is true, then you're my father." Ethan stared at her in complete disbelief. He searched her face once more and now understood why she had looked so familiar from the very beginning. His own blue eyes, his smile, even the small dimple on her left cheek were unmistakable reflections of his family. Emotion overwhelmed him. Without thinking, he stepped forward and embraced Lily. She hesitated for only a second before wrapping her arms around him, holding tightly to the father she had unknowingly searched for her entire life. Just then, another voice called Ethan's name from behind. Noah had driven from Seattle after receiving his father's urgent message about an unbelievable discovery. As he approached, Sarah slowly turned to face the son she had last seen as a 4-year-old child. Noah stood frozen, tears filling his eyes, before he whispered, "Mom?" Sarah broke down completely and ran into his arms. The family held one another beside the river as rain continued to fall around them. 20 years had been stolen by fate, but love had survived every mile, every unanswered question, and every painful memory. At that moment, Ethan realized miracles do not erase the past. They give broken hearts the courage to begin again.